Welcome everyone back to weekly weather updates, and today we're going to be having a look at sudden stratospheric warming. Now we've got currently a sudden stratospheric warming taking place above the North Pole, and it's going to be turning the winds to a reversal, zonal winds at 10 HPA. But I'm going to run through some sudden stratospheric warmings over the last decade, just to highlight what we could be seeing in the next couple of weeks. And we had a sudden stratospheric warming in 2013, 2018, and 2019. And I'm going to be looking at those three examples. Now, all three of them did go cold and snowy. Two of them went very cold and snowy, and one of them went slightly cold and snowy. Now, I'll run through them just to show you what we could be looking at over the next couple of weeks. So first of all, I'm looking at the 2013 sudden stratospheric warming. This is a GIF showing the warming taking place, and it's interesting to look at. This was a split of the polar vortex, and it completely decimated it, really. And that's something that's been cropping up quite a lot. When you do get a split, you're more likely to see more cold towards, more likely it's going to be colder in Europe. So you can see big substantial sudden stratospheric warming splitting the polar vortex with very warm temperatures over the pole. Now, we'll have a look at the GFS reanalysis for that period. So you can see as the sudden stratospheric warming took place in early January, it was very westerly based, with high pressure over the top of the country, not particularly any blocking signal at all. But as we run through, you can start to see high pressure does ridge further north. It's very quickly to propagate through the atmosphere. We start to see blocking further north. Now with 2013, it doesn't have beautiful synoptics that turn it bitterly cold like we'll see with 2018. However, it does go cold with blocking, and we sort of stay on the cold side of the jet stream for a couple of weeks, getting colder and colder, and seeing these low pressures diving further south into cold air, bringing very snowy conditions. You see low pressure further south, high pressure to the north, cold conditions, bringing very snowy conditions before we start to break out that pattern towards the end of January. So you get a good couple of weeks of very snowy conditions there. So again, it's not showing a massive northern blocking with bitterly cold easterly winds, but it's generally just showing you that with blocking to our north, low pressure running further south, feeding a lot of moisture in, is going to be with 2013, it was quite cold but very snowy, and it did last a good couple of weeks with that. We'll have a look at the upper air just to show you what we're looking. So it's very mild at the start. But as we run through that high pressure builds further north, we start to pull in an easterly wind. Now this sort of gives the first stab of cold air into the east, and we sort of stay with cold air to our east. So whenever these lows pull through, they've always got cold air to tap into, and that's something we've been struggling with the last couple of weeks, as most of the air to our north and our east has been relatively mild, with the tropospheric polar vortex currently more towards Siberian side of the North Pole. But that's something we'll look at another date. But as we run through, you can see low pressure running into this cold air, and this blocking to our north, just trying to block out these milder sectors. You see cold air pushing through, and they are marginal snow events, but snow events nonetheless. For a good couple of weeks, we can stay in that or below that -5 line widely, bringing very cold conditions before we start to break out of that towards the end of January. It's just giving you a highlight of what sort of patterns we could be seeing with the sudden stratospheric warming. Now we're going to go to the mother of all sudden stratospheric warmings and effects from that, the 2018 beast from the east. So this is the sudden stratospheric warming, big split in the polar vortex with very warm temperatures over the pole. You see it's not red colours breaking it through, but generally does distort it, and we do get a big split of the polar vortex with a lobe of polar vortex heading through Europe and down to the UK. Now it's difficult to say whether that exact line showed you why we got the beast from the east, but it just generally shows you the split is more favoured for colder conditions. So if we have a look at the reanalysis, and we'll run right back to mid-February, you can see we are in a very westerly phase. So it's really not, there's no initial blocking, maybe a bit of blocking towards Svalbard, but nothing really, especially coming off the Atlantic. You start to see this area of high pressure goes across the country and then moves up towards Svalbard. You see already high pressure building in, deep cold to our east, and it's sort of vertical lobe of high pressure If you look at the Northern Hemisphere, run back a few frames. If you look at the Northern Hemisphere, big blocking over the North Pole. And as we head back to Europe, it always refreshes to the date I set, unfortunately. But then we start to pull in that bitterly cold easterly wind, and it goes very snowy and very cold. And we are quite unfortunate with the beats from the east. It does turn milder again, and we don't get another reinforcement of the blockings. They're still blocking around, but you sort of get reinforcement of the westerlies, unfortunately, and we go much milder again with the southerly winds come early March. We do get another bout of easterly winds come the middle to end of March, which brings pretty cold temperatures for a couple of days. I think it's Saturday, Sunday, Monday, with more snow showers. But again, it just shows you what sort of conditions we can see with the sudden stratospheric warming. So very cold, bitterly cold easterly winds. So just to show you, no sudden stratospheric warming is the same, especially with its effects. So 2013 was a split, and we saw negative NAO and AO blocking areas of low pressure further south, bringing very snowy conditions. But then, with the 2018 sudden stratospheric warming, we saw much more blocking towards Scandinavia with easterly winds. So even though they're very similar events over the stratosphere, we see very different outcomes, both cold and snowy, but we see different outcomes on the surface for Europe. If we have a look at the upper airs quickly for the sudden stratospheric warming in 2018, you see bitterly cold areas being displaced over towards Scandinavia, coming in, minus 15 isotherm, maybe in the minus 20 got through, bitterly cold before Storm Emma moves up from the south, blanketing snow across the south, southwest Wales, with northern England, Scotland getting the bitterly cold easterly winds, before it does generally start to turn a bit milder, especially further south towards the middle of March. The last sudden stratospheric warming we'll have a look at is the 2019 sudden stratospheric warming. Now, this was more of a displacement event, where we saw the polar vortex get displaced before starting to get a little bit of a split, which was not seen in this current GIF. But you see, the sudden stratospheric warming is much more of a displacement event. So again, that's why we're seeing this correlation that some people are suggesting that with a displacement it's less likely to turn cold, whereas with a split, it's in the polar vortex, it's more likely to become cold. So with this, it was more of a displacement event, but it's still some stratospheric warming to say the least, with very warm temperatures. But it wasn't quite the split that we saw in the last two examples. Now, if we run through the GFS analysis, you can start to see we do stay cold with northerly winds, and you start to see the jet stream will start to fall further south, and you can see where this black line is. You see troughs of low pressure diving from the northwest southeast. So what we start to see is a little bit of blocking to the north, more blocking in the Atlantic, and this northwest southeast alignment. Now, many say we didn't really see the effects of the sudden stratospheric warming in 2019, but I'd say, well, you do see this. We do see a colder spell of weather with a negative NAO, not particularly negative AO, however, just a negative NAO, pushing the low pressures further south and dropping colder air in. So you can see as we move through, that's cold weather fronts moving through. We do get brief milder spells there, and then we start quite a cold week from the end of January to early February with this northerly blast, with high pressure not really building in, building more towards Canada, and we stay in this northwesterly airflow, and then we get a little channel low that you can see there that comes through overnight Thursday and Friday, bringing significant snowfall in the south. And generally we have a bit of blocking around, but nothing substantial with the sudden stratospheric warming, with cold northeasterly winds remaining fairly cold before again going westerly. Now there is still some blocking with that come early February, but again, nothing substantial, nothing bringing significant cold, and that's what we're looking at. As we run through, if we run through the 850 HPA temperatures, I've got to load that up. As we run through, you can see it maintains generally cold. We do see milder sectors, and then as we head towards the end of the month, you see cold air maintains over the top of the country for a good week, and we see those colder conditions coming in before the end of the run. We start to turn milder from the southwest. So it is interesting. Cold areas does get displaced towards Scandinavia, but we never really get the synoptics to pull it in. But again, that could be because we had a displacement. Now, finally, we'll have a look at the current sudden stratospheric warming taking place over the North Pole. Now, the warming's already happening, and we are seeing a split in the polar vortex. Now, this is taken from the 1st of January, so this is a couple of days ago, the run, but they are very similar, at least in the shorter term, just so we can see right from the start. And as we run through, you can see warming takes place, and then we start to see a split in the polar vortex. One lobe going towards Europe, another lobe going towards North America. And we don't see a complete split, as in those lobes stay detached for long. They stay detached for a couple days, perhaps, before being reattached much weaker towards the European side of the North Pole. If we run through the longer term, you see the polar vortex is decimated in terms of it's 10-15 degrees warmer than it should be, and we start to see another warming potentially heading up towards Siberia. That's been highlighted, and by the middle of January, you can hardly see a significant polar vortex at all. So that's very interesting to see. I don't really know what would be happening. None of that happened in the other examples we've had going on. So it's just interesting to see what's going to happen with this. We're not seeing any effects currently in the models, and I'll show you the current GFS operational one in a minute. We're not seeing any substantial effects yet, but again, it's early days, and we're likely to see some effects in the next maybe week of model runs, potentially for this sudden stratospheric warming. So I'll have a look at the GFS now. And you can't see we've got easterly winds coming in, but this has got nothing to do with sudden stratospheric warming. But as we run through, quite cold easterly winds today, cold rain for most, but maybe a bit of snow overnight tonight. Beyond that, we have a area of high pressure on the Atlantic, blocking area of high pressure, and we continue pulling in easterly, northeasterly winds. Now, this area of low pressure to our north, sort of pushing down on the high pressure, and it starts to push us into a more of a westerly phase come early next week. It's not going to be very mild, because we still got China Ridge high pressure further north, as we are in a natural blocking pattern right now, which is different to the other three events I've just highlighted. All three events did have westerlies, quite substantial westerlies to begin, but we're in quite a block pattern already. So it's going to be very interesting to see. This is a unique event. As they say, no sudden stratospheric warming event is the same. So you can't guarantee what we saw in the last three events is going to happen. It's just indications of what we could be seeing for everyone out there. Beyond that, high pressure tries to build in over the top of the UK. It'll be going relatively cool under that area of high pressure, and it's a very strong area of high pressure. And we start to see it ridge further northwards, which is very interesting. And a lobe of cold, low pressure starts to seep towards Scandinavia. Now, I'm not going to say that this is the effects of the sudden stratospheric warming, or this is what's going to happen with the sudden stratospheric warming, but as we saw in these other examples, all of the events where we saw big blocking to our north, they all, or at least in the Beast from the East example, and partially the 2013 example, high pressure was over the top of the UK and ridged northwards. Now, in the Beast from the East example, which is sort of the optimum one if you want cold conditions, 2013 was cold and snowy, but again, if that blocking was slightly different, we could have been unlucky and it could have stayed relatively tame. But the Beast from the East is what you're really looking for cold conditions. And we're starting to see that cold air move towards Scandinavia, towards more western parts of Siberia, and high pressure starting ridging further north. It's not going very north yet on this run, but you can just see as we were running through that, it's trying to ridge further north. Hardly any low pressure in the mid-Atlantic, and we're starting to see the high pressure ridge further north, and that could be a precursor to substantial northern blocking. Now, that's an effect of the sudden stratospheric warming, and it could be the start of us seeing some very cold conditions in the final 10 days of January, and even with this current pattern, we're starting to pull in a cold northerly wind with this with this run. Even if we don't pull off substantial blocking, there is still a lot of cold air being displaced to our side of the pole that I would probably suggest any sort of colder synoptics, whether it's substantial blocking or not, we could be seeing some colder conditions. So I still would think, even though we might see a milder middle third of January, and when I say milder, I don't mean it's going to be very mild, wet and windy, just generally milder than we've seen the last 2 weeks since Christmas. It does look like the last of January with the Sudden Stratospheric Warming could be setting up quite cold. But again, you can't really bank on it yet. It's way too early to call it. Just interesting to see what patterns we could be seeing. But anyway, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. Just looking at what we could see with the Sudden Stratospheric Warming. Just showing the different scenarios we could be seeing. It's not a guaranteed beast from the east. But it is quite likely we're going to see colder conditions and potentially for snowier conditions. It's still up in the air at the moment, and it'll be very difficult to say what we're going to see. I'd hope we'd see a better picture in the next week. By maybe next weekend, I suspect we'll start to see some more output toying with the idea of easterly winds or northerly blasts or whatever. And I'll update you on whenever that comes. So thanks for watching, hope you enjoyed, subscribe new, and I'll see you for another video